This next section is going to emphasize that you don't necessarily have to sleep where you work. What does that mean? That means we're not taking a nap on the job. I'm talking, it's not necessary that you have to live in the same area that your business operates. And there's a lot of different ways we could look at this. We're going to share some stories of just our personal experiences, but from a business vantage, where you locate your business is going to really depend on, there could be some infrastructures that might not be available, or taxes might be different. Minimum wage laws might be different. Not that we pay minimum wage, but there's a huge difference between, say, a place in California where their minimum wage is much higher, and then the next state over, it's not anywhere close. So you want to really look at what your target market is. You may not live in your target market. You might live where people think it's a commodity. So it's important to take all these things into consideration. I think from here, it'd be best to talk about some of the personal experiences we've had over the years.
So my target market, including the services I wanted to offer in the actual neighborhoods that I wanted to work in, because early on, I realized I don't want to be driving around town. I started doing that. A real estate agent, John, gave me her listings and said, hey, until the houses sell, will you maintain my portfolio? And then as soon as the house sells, it's up to you to talk to the new homeowner and sell yourself to them. And I thought this was great until I started driving around Atlanta with all this windshield time, realizing actually I'm stretched out all over the place. So I want to select a neighborhood or two and just dominate in those neighborhoods. And so I went for the neighborhoods where the money was, literally $1 million plus homes, really high end. And in order to work in those neighborhoods, though, I actually couldn't afford to live in the neighborhood. Would have been nice, but I couldn't have financially. The property taxes and the upkeep on the house alone would have cleaned me out when I was starting. So I lived, 12 miles away or so, and I'd have to drive home at night, drive over in the morning. But I knew this is where I want to build my business. This exact neighborhood, there's actually 2 or 3 of them. I'm like, I want to take over this area and dominate. And so I slept, where I could have my humble home and afford, and I drove to where my business was. And eventually, thankfully, I was able to move closer. But when I started out, they were separated.
Right. And as you look at things through a different lens, not just a personal, as an individual, look at things through how a business looks through things. Like, say you had a board of directors. Even if you don't, you're not going to have it right now, right? But you have to look at through that filter and go, guys, listen, we would save a ton of money by operating. For me, I live in Indiana. I am very close to the Illinois border, but the taxes are totally different. It's much more economical for us to live in Indiana, and you could possibly work in Illinois, but you have to really look at the government, the state taxes, the laws. There could be a whole different, even though you're operating the same business, it may need to be operated in a different manner if you cross state lines.
Yeah, and 2 more examples, John, of this. In Jason Creole's business, a fertilization and weed control business, he selected these very large neighborhoods with some higher-end homes, and he targeted those areas. Well, he eventually bought, I think it was 3 or 4 acres. I was just there a few months ago. And he bought a home that's near those neighborhoods now. So he actually lives pretty close to where he works. But he was very strategic this is where I can make the most profit in these neighborhoods. And he just happens to live pretty close to there now that he bought those houses. But our friend Naylor Taliaferro has a really good point. He won't take any customers that actually live in his exact development, in his exact neighborhood, because he's like, I don't want to be out on a Saturday afternoon, playing catch with my son, and my neighbor is like, hey, you didn't do this job yet you said you were going to do. What are you doing playing catch with your son? Get over here and, yank out this bush. And Naylor's like, I don't want that. So he has a hard rule. Literally, his exact neighborhood he lives in, he won't take any properties. Now, the neighborhood across the street, because they won't be as nosy and driving by and be like, why are you washing your car and you didn't put my mulch in yet? Right. So that's just something to consider And don't be ashamed that you can't afford to live where you want to, where your target market is right now. But just know it's a danger trap if you're like, oh, well, I'll just pick up that yard real close to where I live if it's not in your target market.
Right. Yeah, because then your routing, your route density gets scattered. And we'll talk about that more later. The last thing that I would like to add to this is, let's just say you live in this town and you're going to build a shop, or it doesn't even have to build a shop in the town that you're going to work in. One thing, especially for guys that are just getting in, or guys that are still, after 5-6 years, still working out of their garages and dragging all their equipment to the desired location, you really use the rental storage places. I mean, our business, we rent several units. We have 4 units that we rent out, and 3 of which are in one location, and we have one that's on one side of town. We used it for snow removal because it was kind of out of our way. Instead of the guys meeting at our one location, the central location, they would just drive the vehicle to that remote area and still be able to take care of the properties when it snowed. And that's a whole different story. You guys that do snow, you understand. Sometimes the drive time, even if it's just a couple miles, but it snows 3 inches, it's a whole different ballpark. You could strategize in that way too, to where instead of having just one remote location, or excuse me, one central location, you could use storage units to be like little satellite shops for yourself.
Yeah, that are located in the service area that you want your customers to be.
Correct.
So I agree 100%. And for a season in my business, John, that's what I did. I drove over there. The closest storage unit to the neighborhood is where we were at, and it's very convenient.
Excellent. So,
all righty. Well, we'll catch you guys in the next module.